largest portion of the laboratory's budget, and a very complex job to do. So we are thrilled to have Frances here with us today, and I will say also from a personal perspective, we're thrilled to have Frances at the laboratory in her position. She brings, along with Triad and our new management team, great depth of knowledge about the laboratory, but also a new attitude about how we do business and how we do business in a more open way, which we have heard this morning, even from Patrick Sullivan earlier this morning, how helpful that's been to many of our community organizations. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Frances Terry.
So if you took one thing away from that, it's I'm a trailing spouse. So I know there are many others like me. I'm still a trailing spouse, and I remember coming here and thinking, what am I going to do in this place, right? I'm not a nuclear physicist or a material scientist or whatever, so I've kind of almost sort of by accident, as it were, sort of tried to make my way in doing something to support the lab and its great mission in some way where I felt I could be useful. I was talking with Debbie earlier, and I think I worked with Debbie in one of my very first jobs at the lab back in 1997, and she reminded me I had been at her wedding. I had completely forgotten that. So anyway, that's also representative of what is essentially a small town, right, with lots of interrelationships that keep going and crossing each other over many years, and that's certainly been my experience. And as Kathy said, one of the most enjoyable parts of my job in this new role has been the interactions with the community and all of that entails, and I hope we're just at the cusp of really cementing those relationships in lots of different ways. Tom Mason, who's our lab director, has brought with him, I think, a lot of experience and just a lot of real genuine passion for engagement with the community, whether it be in education, which he's extremely passionate about, but also economic development. And pretty much everyone I've met from Battelle, which is where Tom Mason comes from, really lives and breathes that, I think. I want to introduce Drew Fuller, who's a recent member to join Lanel, who comes from Battelle also, just moved here with his family, so he'll be experiencing the public school system before too long. And Drew is now our new head of procurement. He worked with us over transition last year. And so if you haven't already met Drew, please introduce yourself after. We also have Chris Fresquez here, who has for quite a long time led our small business office at the lab. How many years have you been doing that now, Chris?
What's that?
How many years have you been leading that? I'm trying to remember.
6 years in the small business program, 28 years at the lab.
That's right. So Chris and I used to work together when I was the business manager for the weapons program, because he was the procurement representative assigned to us at that time. So we were very sorry to lose him at the time, but now I'm glad that he moved. Anyway, let's see, can we go to, the first two slides are really old news if you've been at all aware that Triad is the new contractor, but just in case anyone hadn't heard that, can we go to the first slide, please? So just a reminder, right, to those of you who haven't had a chance to hear from Tom or one of our other leadership members, there are three main partners that make up Triad, which is a new contractor. I was just talking to Bill Watt, who's had a long relationship with the University of California in many leadership roles at the lab, and Triad, and I think this was something that was well received, certainly by many employees at the lab, still has its connection with the University of California. They are one of our three partners that form Triad. There's a new kid on the block, which is Texas A&M. This is the first time they've ever had any involvement in running a national lab. They're tremendously excited about it. It's quite funny. But they're coming out here a lot. They really want to see what can they do, how can they partner, where do we need some of their engineering expertise. They're the largest engineering school in the country. So we're really happy to have them on board. And as I say, their enthusiasm is quite quite infectious. And then Battelle is the third member, Battelle Memorial Institute. Battelle is not new to running labs. It's kind of their core business, essentially. They have run many of the Office of Science labs for many years, very successfully. But they have never run an NNSA lab. This is new for them, that the national security aspect of it is different. But they do bring tremendous depth of expertise in safe operations. And as I mentioned earlier, I think Tom really sort of embodies their real commitment to non-profit aspects of running the contract and very much steeped in the community in which they operate. That is true in every place that they run a lab. They really engage very carefully. The CEO of Battelle, Lou Van Fair, was here recently, and I hear that for him in Columbus, Ohio, he spends a huge amount of his time engaging with the local community there himself. That is extremely important to the Battelle philosophy of what it means to run a national lab, that it's running a lab in the community, and that is an extraordinarily important partnership, and you never look at the lab in isolation. It's always the lab as part of Los Alamos County, as part of northern New Mexico, as part of the state, always having that kind of broader look on the place where we reside. Let's see, we also have two smaller contractors, HII and Floor. Floor, you may know from it, has a lot of construction expertise, and HII has a lot of depth in nuclear facility operations in particular, which we're bringing to bear at TA55. And then we have three dedicated subcontractors, Longenecker, Merrick, and Texels. And they are well-known entities, of course, in this community. We sought them out early in the process and asked them to work with us, and we hope that that will be an important part of sort of establishing a really robust contracting base within the community as well. Let's go to the next one real quick. I don't want to dwell on all charts, but it seems like it's obligatory at some level. Tom Mason, if you haven't met him, he's our lab director. And then we have three deputies sort of arranged around ops, which is Kelly Bierschmidt. I know Kelly has been working very closely with the county, talks, I think, almost weekly with members of the county about a lot of things that he's pushing that I'll talk about in a little. Bob Webster is I don't want to say a holdover, because that sort of, it sounds like I'm diminishing him at some level, but we've kept a lot of continuity in the weapons program. We felt that was important, and Bob is a very well-respected and experienced member of the weapons program. And then John Sorrell, who has also been here for quite a long time also. He's our Deputy for Science, Technology and Engineering, has a very broad reputation across the science complex, DOE Office of Science Labs as well. So that's sort of in a nutshell how we're organised with then 12 senior team members below that. Yes?
Is it possible for you to wear a mic?
So you have mic'd me up, but you said it's just for the camera. And I'm sorry, I'm recovering from a cold, so my voice is not as good as... I just spent the last 2 weeks in England, and I invariably catch a cold in England, so I will try my best.
Thank you.
Let's see, let's go to the next one, please.
Francis, could you just stand down and down?
Stand down at that. And then I feel like I'm turning my back to you. But if we can... No... Back. This one goes back. Okay, I seem to be missing a few bullets there. That's okay. What the slide should say is external partnerships are critical to how we operate, which is kind of the crux of what I want to talk to today. But that's okay. Apologies for that. I think I already sort of stated, that the partnerships with the community are kind of an essential part of who we are, and not just the folks who are on the ground here, but also our partners. They have all visited here. They are all very interested in understanding how we are going to work with and benefit the community in which we work. So it's not just those folks that you just saw in that org chart beforehand. It's broader than that. As I said, Texas is here all the time. We've had Battelle folks here a lot. Kathy has been working very closely with the Battelle equivalent of her office. They've been running essentially a non-profit since 1920 something, I think. So their history goes back a long time, and they know how to do this stuff. They have done a lot of grants in the community, and so Kathy has been working with them to essentially implement that same kind of thing here with the philanthropic dollars that we're giving to the community. I wanted to highlight kind of the three main areas in which we are doing that. One is in education, so working with the Lannan Foundation and giving additional dollars to see how we can even leverage even further the good work that they do to improve education at the K through 12 and even preschool level. Economic development is sort of the second leg of those three areas that we're looking at. We've done a lot of discussions with the RDC to talk about how could we give them money to further some of the things that they're working as well with working with small businesses and giving maybe some small business loans, etc. And then the third one is what you might just call pure philanthropy, but looking at what are the areas that face northern New Mexico in which we could make a difference. And one of the things that we heard a lot last summer was the prevalence of a lot of drug addiction issues in northern New Mexico. And so we are giving some dollars to United Way to see if they can again leverage programs they've already got in place. We don't want to reinvent the wheel or pretend in any way that we suddenly come in and know what needs to be done differently. We're trying to look at how can we put dollars in places that are making an impact to try to increase the impact that they're having in those areas. Another area where we have put a lot of effort that I think is important to note is a reset in our partnership with the NNSA and with the government. That had become, I think it would be fair to say, fairly strained over the last contract. And we feel like we are not going to be able to do what we need to do unless we have them lined up with us, unless they are full partners with us. And so I think that whole partnership thing works on many different levels. It's a partnership with the NNSA, it's a partnership with the community, it's a partnership with the state, it's a partnership with the county. So again, we see ourselves very much as an entity that's part of something greater. And again, that sort of has been informing many of the things that we've sort of started pushing, many of the initiatives that we've been doing. All right, you're going to run it for me. All right. Well done, Chris. This is Chris Franzak, by the way. So she works in our communications department, works real closely with me and helped get the slides ready for me. So thank you, Chris. Let's see. So not without controversy, I would say. One of the things we're trying to do is think about the physical infrastructure of the lab and how that should evolve. We didn't want to think of it as just around I can't really say 4 lines around the lab because the site doesn't really look like that. There's an awful lot of squiggly bits around all the mesas, but thinking beyond what is it that we maybe need on site to how could we better promote access to the site for those who work here, for people who want to do business with us. One of the things that we're facing generally is housing shortage seems to be extremely high right now. People like Drew coming into town, he's like, I can't find a house. What am I going to do here? I just made an offer to someone this week and I said, do you have any advice on the housing? Because I've heard there's just nothing there. So that is something that we kind of need the county and local developers help with, right? There is far more demand than there is supply in housing right now. Lots of things that I'm not going to talk in too much detail about, but there are lots of things that struck the team when they came in, especially if they came from, shall we say, a slightly more urban or less remote area than we are here. One of the first ones, within I think a week of Kelly Bierschmidt getting on site, he was like, what's the deal with the cell coverage here? It's absolutely terrible. How do you function? I mean, I just can't deal with this. And so he's been looking at ways to try to build new cell towers, I will tell you, it's been an uphill struggle. Like, he is tearing his hair out about how is this so hard, right? But I will also say that Kelly's the kind of guy who doesn't give up, right? So he is a push until he gets what he thinks we need to get. Roads. So let's see. I think it was in the May all hands meeting. Tom mentioned that there's been discussion about reprising the idea of connector road that might connect from somewhere in Los Alamos County to maybe the southern end of the relief route, or maybe some part of I-25 or something like that. And part of that is because I talked about the housing shortage, but there's also a labour shortage, right? We know we're going to be hiring here. We already have needs for craft, etc., that exceed what we're able to get. And so having access to essentially the Albuquerque market in terms of resources, whether that's housing, whether that's people, whether that's subs, would seem to be a good thing, right? Because we simply can't get enough of what we need here. So there has been talk around that. I know there's been some people have different opinions of that, and that's just fine. And this is going to go through many iterations, many discussions. Some of this will go forward, some won't, or it'll look very different when it does from where it is now. But it's a starting point, and I think that's our intention, is to say, look, let's rethink and think outside the box on how we could do things differently. And again, not just within the site, but more broadly within the county and the state. Other ideas we've talked about, public-private partnerships, maybe looking at, hey, could we get a developer to build, say, a new badge office, for example, that might be located on the town site, because one of the things that we have to deal with a lot is parking and accessibility, and we have lots of people trying to get to the badge office, and it's right in the middle of TA3, and there's nowhere to park, and so no reason why that would have to be on site, right? It could be off site. Another idea we've talked about is warehousing. Do we need to have the warehouse right in the middle of TA3? Maybe we could have an outside developer come and build a warehouse for us that we would lease, and they would have a guaranteed stream of income to repay the investment that they would have made to build a warehouse. And again, get it off-site so we don't have anywhere near as many trucks trying to get in through those vehicle access portals to get right into the middle of TA3. So trying to think about things in a different way, and that's, I think, one of the benefits of having a new team, right? They're not sort of, oh, we tried that before, or whatever, I mean, they're like, hey, why don't we do this? Why are we doing this, right? They think of things afresh, and that's always a good thing. Bridge, right? So there's been a line item proposed in the budget for many years to replace the bridge. It's aging. It's been there since 1950 something. I can't remember exactly, 53, 56, something like that. Needs a major retrofit that's probably going to cost in the 100 million plus kind of amount. And so another thought is, well, maybe we just build a new bridge. Maybe we have two bridges over the canyon. So looking at things like that. Let's see, let's go to the next slide, Chris. Talked some about this already. One of the things that we worked on early on is we wanted to engage the local colleges and institutes of higher education here in northern New Mexico, of which there are many. Cindy is here with UNMLA, for example. So we have a lot of skill sets that we are looking that we're going to need over the next few years, which go beyond the recruiting that we do for PhD scientists and engineers. So we tend to recruit both nationally and internationally for PhD scientists and engineers. I told you I was a trailing spouse, right? But an awful lot of our workforce could, in principle, come from New Mexico, and we would like, to the extent that we can recruit, it's probably somewhere in the order of about 3/4 of our folks that work at the lab. There's no reason why they couldn't come from New Mexico, and so we are very committed to try to work with the local colleges on programs that particularly are aimed at skill set we know we're going to need in the next 2, 5, 10 years, whatever that is, and try to be more deliberate and strategic about setting in place programs that give us that pipeline instead of kind of just letting it kind of happen, which is how it's sort of felt, I think, in the past. And so we have been working agreements with UNMLA with Northern New Mexico College and talking with others about trying to, I think there's plenty of work for everyone. It's certainly, I don't think this is something where we certainly don't want to put the colleges in competition with themselves. I think we have so much need that there is no issue with that. It's more, how many can you support, I think. And we have been giving dollars to help set up those programs as well, to go hire the right people, to get the program in place so that they're ready for the first set of folks to start. So that's something we're very, very committed to. Let's go to the next one. So this is a little bit more of sort of inside stuff, but you may know that in the request for proposal that the government put out, there was a paragraph in there that had never appeared in any other contract recompete statement for a national lab. And it was to implement sustained culture change, essentially, and there were a few more words around it. It didn't give a lot of detail, but it said they wanted to see culture change to address what the government saw as a failure to make safe and stable operations a part of the sort of way of doing normal business. So this is one of those things. It's quite amorphous, right? It's not very, very well defined. I mean, talking about the culture of any organization is very, very subjective by its very nature. And so that is one of the things that we are working hard to sustain. It does not happen overnight, right? We certainly have customers in Washington who are saying, all right, so have you changed the culture yet? Or, you know, that's a hard question to answer. And yet I think we all know, and people who work at the lab know, that we don't want to be on the front page of the newspapers every day, right? That is not, we want to be proud of working at Los Alamos, and we would like the community to be proud that Los Alamos is an essential part of its community. And part of that entails not being in the newspaper. Well, we'd like to be in the newspaper, but for good things, right? And not for bad things. And try as we may, right? Los Alamos has been in the news over the last 6-7 years several times in not very glowing words, right? So we are doing a lot of things to try to change the culture. There is no one thing. There are many initiatives that we're doing, whether that's obviously setting the tone from the top. It's not going to happen though just because of 17 people coming in and now saying we're the Triad leadership team. It has to be far more deep than that. Each employee who works at the lab has to feel that change and believe that change has happened. And again, that doesn't happen overnight. So that is a long process. And a topic of a lot of discussion in the executive team, and it's a journey. Let's put it that way. And I think the way I think about it is, if we look 2 years from now, 5 years from now, what I would hope is that we say, yeah, this place really has changed, and we'll be able to point to things that feel very concrete at that point. It just doesn't feel very concrete right now. Let's go to the next one. Oh, budgets are looking good, right? So Kathy said I have a background in finance, so this is an easy part of my job is all right, what does the budget look like? And I'm always looking at what's coming out from Washington, etc. And I would say we have tremendous support right now from NNSA and have had tremendous support from Congress in our mission for the last several years. Even with the economic downturn in 2008, within a few years of that, things really became healthy again and has not stopped since then. One of the things, of course, that's driving that you've probably read about in the paper is the decision made on pit production. So the government released a decision last year to pursue a dual approach for pit production, to produce plutonium pits here at Los Alamos in the order of around 30 a year by the year 2026, and to pursue a parallel effort in Savannah River to produce about another 50. Now they're starting more or less from scratch, but we already have a plutonium facility, so obviously we're the immediate need there. And that also gives me confidence that that's not going away, right? There's a lot of money that's going to be coming in little in the 20 budget, but particularly in the 21 budget. That looks very, very solid, and I do not see any way in which the government is going to back away from that, at least from the foreseeable future, because there is no other alternative right now. And the Department of Defense is very, very insistent on their need and this requirement. So the budgets are looking very healthy. We are going to be hiring. I think we're going to need something in the order of 1,500 additional people in the next few years. That's why the housing is an issue. That's why things like roads are something I think we need to look at. So I would say, to the extent that Los Alamos, of course, is a pretty big part of what drives the Los Alamos economy, the outlook, I think, is very, very good and very solid. Let's go to the next one. So in our proposal that we put forward to the government, we actually scored the highest of any of the 4 proposals on small business, which is why Chris is a busy guy these days, because we made a lot of commitments and then we turned to Chris and said, okay, we need you to now execute. But again, that's something that I think also comes through the Battelle culture somewhat, which is this real emphasis on, hey, we want to be partners with the community. We know there are a lot of small businesses there that want to do work with the lab, and we're serious about, to the extent that those businesses are there and have those services to offer, we want to use them. So Drew certainly has a leadership role in fulfilling our commitments on this. Yeah, he's not taking a vacation this summer. So that's something that's, I hope you've heard that up to this point, at least certainly every time Tom has talked to the community, he has talked about this. There's something in particular coming up that I'd like you to help raise awareness of, which is we're calling it a construction, are we calling it a construction or a subcontractor forum? So invites have already gone out. So on August the 8th, I think it's at Buffalo Thunder, correct, Chris? We are inviting subcontractors to spend a day with us to talk about how we can do, he's got flyers right here. Is there anything else you want to? We've put out invites, right?
What's that?
We've put out invites, but it's a broad.
It's free.
If there's anyone else who hasn't seen this and would like to come, I would say it kind of goes beyond construction as well. I mean, it's specifically for construction, but could be of interest to others.
Construction, on-site services, responding to RFPs, learning more about our forms, safety plans, security plans, that type of focus.
And in the same time, Drew is streamlining our subcontractor processes, right? To try to make doing work with the lab easier, because that's something that certainly we've heard in droves, right? It's so hard to do business with the lab. There's so many pieces of paper you've got to do. Some small businesses give up, right? And we want to try to make it easier for them to do that.
That's right.
Let's go to the next. Oh, okay, we get close to the end. So any questions? Yes, Bill.
So in the last topic, are you getting the support you feel you need? And this may be also for Drew on the Streamline process. Sometimes the federal overseer has been supportive, other times not. So what's your sense on how are the stars aligned for streamlining at this point?
I think it's, I think Francis mentioned we're working really hard to partner with our government oversight to make sure that they're comfortable with what we're doing. We're going to look to make incremental progress. So what you'll see the 8th is sort of incremental progress to make things a bit easier. We're going to keep working on that over the course of probably a couple of years. But we're going to work really closely with the government. The government contracting officer has an office in our building so that they can be part of what's going on. So we're going to really partner closely with them to get it moving, and they've been very supportive so far.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've found is, and again, we talked about this a little earlier, and this is a bit of luck at some level, is our local federal office, so the Los Alamos site office, which is just up the road from the main part of the lab. The leadership there also wants their office to change, to have a more, shall we say, enabling philosophy on getting work done. And that's partly in response to the new NNSA administrator, a lady called Lisa Gordon-Haggerty, who has been extremely supportive of, one of the phrases she uses is, how do we get to yes? So one of her big pushes is, let's not keep talking about why we can't do things or what's stopping us from doing things. I want to know how we actually make it happen. And so the philosophy and the sort of tone that she has set has been very much one that obviously our site office is then responding to, which is how do we get things done? How do we make sure that we can execute this PIT mission that we've given to Los Alamos? You tell us what we need. Local federal folks, I want you to help support that and make sure Los Alamos has what it needs to be able to execute. So, as I say, at some level we've been lucky, right? That was not the tone that was necessarily being set by the top in headquarters 3-4 years ago. Yes, Chris?
So the day before the
Another
August 8th
flyer.
event, there's the 6th and 7th event also in Albuquerque, which information's been sent out as well to all the chambers. And Lisa Gordon-Haggerty will be speaking at this event.
Oh, so she is one impressive lady. I would urge people to go to that. She has not worked at Los Alamos, but she did spend part of her career at Livermore, so she knows the national lab, she knows the mission. And I think she has been a real force for change and force for good within NNSA. We're very pleased to work with her. Anything else? Sorry, I feel like I've had my back to you the whole time. David?
So first of all, as a county councilor, I think I have seen kind of a different relationship emerging, more outreach, and you did mention that community involvement is one of the 4 pillars.
Yes, it is. That's right. Yeah.
Which was not.
I think that was one of the bullets I was missing. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, which is really great. And in fact, at one of the events where Director Mason was presenting, I kidded him and I said, "How do you do your day job? You know, coming to all these things." And his answer was, "This is my day job," which I thought was very telling. That he saw that community involvement was important, and I think that is permeating both the organization and also the zone side office. Now, my question is.
I'll use that story in future.
Yeah.
It's a good one. He didn't tell me about that.
The question is about the Albuquerque office, and sometimes that connection is more distant, maybe bureaucratic is the term. Do you see that changing as well? That communication, because that.
No, that's a good point. I would say that is the hardest thing to overcome at the moment, because they're removed from that closeness of the field office, which is working with us. They tend to, there's a lot of bureaucracy and bureaucratic types of things that are run out of that office. They're not running the weapons program, for example, out of that office, but they are in charge of things like procurement approvals and HR type approvals and real estate actions, hence the cell tower discussions. I think that is one of our real challenges. I think we're hoping a combination of continued reinforcement of message from Lisa Gordon-Haggerty will help. The other person that we've engaged with closely is Jim McConnell, who's head of NA50, which is the infrastructure arm of NNSA. The folks who handle the real estate approvals, for example, do work for him. And so we've been trying to work with Jim closely on getting his approval and buy-in on where we want to go.
That's something that maybe
no, it's a hard one.
From the local government side, something that we can help promote that type of.
That's a good thought. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we value any help. I would say that people who represent the county, people in the state can give. I mean, things like, for example, we had some quite negative press, which we thought was a bit unwarranted, from the Albuquerque Journal a couple of months ago. Our hope would be is that the work that we do as part of Tom's day job and whatever it is in the community are such that the readership of the Albuquerque Journal discounts that kind of article in future, because they say, no, that's not been our experience of working with the lab. We see them as a partner, and we think they're very important, and we want to express our support for them, right? And so when Tom says it's our day job, that is absolutely what certainly I have seen him live and breathe, which is we are part of this community, right? And that is an extremely important part of what we do. And yeah, you're right. He likes to run the lab via something that he calls the lab agenda. He did this at Oak Ridge. He was director there for 10 years. And there are 4 main pillars of that. 3 are fairly predictable, right? The weapons program, the science and technology that underpins that, and the operations of all the facilities, etc., that we do. But number 4 is community involvement. And so he views that as having equal importance and impact as those other 3. And I think that's a new way, again, of looking at our role in the community. The other thing that he insists upon is that every member of the leadership team be engaged in the community in some form or fashion, and believes that that is part of what we should be doing as part of our job, not just as a nice to have or paying lip service, but an integral part of how we manage and think about challenges that we face. How do we work with the community on this? That should be one of the first questions that we should be asking. But not without its challenges, right? I mean, it's, the ideal sounds great, but we know that there are a lot of people who are resistant to that as well, and don't want the lab to be here, don't believe in its mission. We're not going to win everyone over, right? Yes.
So I just wanted to express gratitude for the continued investment in the community, excuse me, in all of the areas that you are focused on. One of the things that we have been noticing in the community is that there has been some hesitancy from some of the subcontractors to continue their investment because of the lack of a language in the contracts with regard to the flow down. Excuse me, can you give us an update on where we are with that reinsertion of the language and the requirement for them to do investment in the communities? The leveraging that occurs
Right.
with those dollars is significant in our communities.
So I can talk to that, yes. So I think it's maybe around Christmas that was brought to our attention. I think it was you who brought it to our attention. So nice to meet you, by the way. I've seen your name many times. And so we had a discussion in the director's office about it, and we engaged the field office. So what we couldn't do was change the language in the RFP, and it did not require that same language on, I think it was requiring subcontractors, right, to use a portion of their income to invest in a community plan that would give dollars, I think, directly to non-profits or something like that, right? So there had been explicit language in the previous contract that required this. The government, for whatever reason, and I don't know their motives, left it out in our contract. So that was a change. And so I think you raised this to our attention. And so what we talked with the local federal officials. They said, well, there's no desire to go back and change the contract language. So what we proposed instead, and we worked with Kathy's office on this, is instead inserting language into our annual community commitment plan, which the field office gets, and which is a written submission to them that's required in the contract. And we put language in there. And can you remember exactly what the line was? I can't, but it was something to the order of that we would work with the subcontractors on investment of their dollars or something like that. I can't remember exactly what we said.
Coordinate with them and then annual reports back about what that is so that we can monitor what those.
So I think to try to at least give it some visibility so that it didn't go away, essentially. So it was something that we would look at and we would engage with people on, report on. Right, we couldn't change the language in the contract, right? That was a federal decision, and they did not want to change that. But we tried to recognize the gap by putting something in that deliverable to the federal government on our part.
So has that been communicated to the subcontractors?
I don't
That is
know.
now part of the language, that is the new language? Because I've not heard the...
Well, so language hasn't changed, right, in the
No,
contract.
but
But we have put something in the submission. So I don't know, and I don't know that you would know about that,
I
Drew,
don't know.
because you haven't been...
We'll take that back and look at it.
Yeah.
If it has to be communicated.
Yeah. Chris?
So in the
Sorry.
appendix M, we got to an opportunity to revise that and rewrite that piece of it. So we did insert some of that language in appendix M, which is currently to the site office for review.
Yeah, but it was
Still
not,
under review.
but it did not go back to the previous language, I believe, right? It was a
It's a
modification.
variation of, yeah, not exactly.
Yeah, okay.
But it's still under review. It's still under review.
Appendix M, okay. So you
Thank
said
you.
Appendix M is still under review?
Yeah, that's the regional purchasing.
But the community commitment plan has been submitted with that change. I know that for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Cindy?
Hi, so I'm Cindy Rooney, and I'm at UNMLA, and thank you all for coming here, and Rand, thank you. When you drove in, you see the sign that says UNMLA is here to serve our community. We believe that. A big part of that is also supporting LAM. And so one of the reasons we're here today, as opposed to in there, is the computational physics group has using our facilities. So you will see young people coming, young people, I don't know what they are, graduate students. They're there. I haven't tested their age, but they're there. And
Younger than
they
us.
also reserve the room over there. So for the summer, this building kind of transitions a little bit into, my favorite memory is last year watching the World Cup with people from around the world in the building here as it was happening. And so that was fun. I want to build off of that because I think part of our mission here at UNMLA is to support the lab and the
Thank you.
mission. And I think that the community feels the same way. And so I want to ask you specifically, what can members of this community do to support the lab and their mission? Housing, I know, workforce development, I know, but what are some other things?
I would like to think that when you're interacting with, shall we say, state officials, federal officials, press, any entity on which we rely, that you communicate that partnership and what we're doing to both enable, for example, in the programs you're working, to enable us to have the workforce we need for the future, and that sort of symbiotic relationship of we need you and you need us, and how those changes are making an impact. That's, as I sort of mentioned, the Albuquerque Journal article, right? That's something outside of our control. They're going to write what they're going to write. But my sense is if over time they see that, no, that the community likes having Los Alamos here, then their readership isn't going to want to hear that kind of story, and maybe they won't write that kind of story. So that certainly helps, and we appreciate any avenue in which you can express that partnership. Yeah. Bill?
So, going back to the issue of safe operations and culture change, I remember fresh out of graduate school, my first job was at Mountain Laboratory in Ohio, which used to be part of the UAE weapons complex at the time. So in graduate school, especially if you're a theoretician, you don't get a lot of safety training. But first time I went into the lab, you can't miss it. There was this big clock. Monsanto was running the laboratory at the time. And the clock was spinning along and saying how many hours that had been worked before the last lost work time accident. So it was up to like 40 million or something. It was huge. They were actually one of the leaders in the country. So you knew right away safety was important. A couple of days later, maybe a couple of weeks later, I was biking into the lab, and suddenly, I'm from the East Coast, I thought, it looked like hurricane warning flags coming up. There were these black and red flags, and then I went down into my lab, and in the hallway there were all these posters, again, black and white, but with a number, like number 3. And I asked my boss, what is this? Well, this was the 3rd security incident of the year they had just had. So it was very clear, and also through orientation, that safety and security were extremely important. And I think that's something that's, so that's one sort of a recommendation. It had a big impression on me as a graduate student. And the other thing is from the standpoint of how the community could help. If we have a community that also, David's left, but that puts safe operations and encourages that, and so that the county and the schools and everyone is trying to be a role model for safety. That's part of the culture.
Yeah, it's a nice thought.
And so that's one of the things that Because often I've found, I know some people, past leaders in environment, safety, and health, had tried to promote it in the community, and they really didn't get very far. But maybe we
Maybe
can
this is an
do it
opportunity.
differently, because it is the Achilles heel of the lab
It is.
and the contract. So if the community wants to retain a strong, powerful laboratory that drives the economy in a great way, we also have to be part of that safety culture.
I really like that thought, yeah. Making it real will
Right,
be
that's right.
the next, yeah, no, thank you for that, yeah. Let's see, I don't know how we're doing on time or how much time
just
you
about there.
All right, okay. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate the questions and you listening, so.